This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For April 23rd, 2021, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another Friday afternoon podcast adventure with the AV SuperFriends. My name's Chris Decter. I'm joined by Larry, Jamie, Rachel, Mark, and Justin. And today's topic is going to be two topics because we've got two topics to discuss.
Because we can do that. It's our show.
It's our show. We do what we want. So we're gonna go over the future of distance education and whatever that means. We're going to talk about some movable AV furniture. And we're going to be joined by an AV integrator to talk about the relationship between AV integrators and higher ed institutions and how that looks. So
it is a jam-packed show today.
There's a lot to get to. We're going to set everything to 1.5 speed, and we're not going to adjust the pitch. So we'll sound like chipmunks, and you'll have to deal with it. So first topic for today is going to be on distance learning and distance education. There were a couple of articles we sent around this week. There was one from a commercial integrator, and it referred to a survey done from education data that said 33% of higher education institutions are thinking about continuing their remote and online course options. And I thought, well, that seems awfully low. I suspect that means that 67% of institutions are wrong.
Even those 33% could be wrong because they're just thinking about it.
They're just
not doing it yet.
They're not committed.
It makes me feel like they didn't understand the question.
It was probably worded
if
very
only
poorly.
33% said yes, maybe they were thinking like we're going to do things exactly the same way next year, and God knows it'll all continue to evolve. But
I suspect it did have to do with the way it was. You don't think that you're going to do
distance learning? That's adorable, but it's not true.
So I suspect it did have the way it was worded. I don't have the actual survey in front of me, but it is at educationaldata.org, and the quote here says, the pull quote, 33% of post-secondary school administrators indicate they will continue to offer both remote and online course options even after their campuses have reopened. Well, I would hope that the others are also going to, but maybe 33% said they're only going to do that and others are not. But that just seems like a weirdly low number. So
it depends what the research says. I mean, if they're showing they're not getting the results they expect, I could see them putting hybrid on hold and saying, until we figure out how to do this right, we're going to offer online or we're going to offer in person. We're not going to try to force what we're doing now in the future. I mean, I can see the argument to say, let's not say that what we did this past year is what we're going to continue to do. Let's figure out how to do it better.
I'm sure there was some stopgap stuff in there that was kind of, well, we did this and got some stuff together. And I guess it was technically distance education-esque.
But that's the thing. How do you define that?
Right.
And there's so many different definitions of being able to do that. And,
let's get into it. Let's figure it out.
So we at Indiana,
or maybe the other ones are just shutting down.
We at Indiana, we call ours Rooflex because we like that name. No,
you must have stole it from a university that you're familiar with.
So there's another article I do want to bring up real quick that was talking about it. They had a virtual roundtable with a bunch of integrators and education people, and they talked about that they really think that distance education is going to be a big deal in the future. And this apparently is news. And
the future is tomorrow, right?
Refreshing.
The future is yesterday, apparently.
The future is several years ago. So again, and I find this general conversation about and it keeps coming up, and it's been a year now, and now I just openly shout at people when they ask. But when they say things like, "How are you responding to COVID?" The first thing I say is, "That's pretty cool. Where'd you get that time machine?"
Because so when you sneeze, you close your, you kind of cover your face.
Sneeze into your elbow.
Sneeze into so that's how you do it.
Because they're asking questions that should have been asked not just a year ago, but a year ago was a time to quickly implement. But, these are questions that should have been asked 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And if you did sit on the sidelines and miss that opportunity, I can't help you at this point. So I think that distance education is not going anywhere. But Justin, you raise a really good point. What does distance education mean? If you ask somebody in 2005, and somebody in 2010 and now somebody in 2021, they probably all mean slightly different things.
Well,
how do we define distance education?
If you ask someone in Kentucky versus Oregon versus Indiana, you might have different definitions too. Just saying. So, you have what we do is all online, where teacher records video, posts video to Blackboard, student ingests video, they take tests. That's online learning. They pay a premium for that at WKU. Then
totally
you have,
asynchronous, like no live portion of this.
Well, the only live portion is Q&A, office time, if you will. They might have a Zoom call with the teacher to ask questions,
but not during scheduled
hours.
Class time.
No, it's just all online. That's how actually I got my master's. So you can go through a whole master's program, not attend class, not attend a live class, and get a piece of paper. Or you could do distance education. Another way that we do it is room to room, from main campus to regional cities, because historically, the old ITV model, we don't have good internet. So the students are going to drive somewhere where they do have good internet, and teachers can teach synchronously or asynchronously, however they want to do it. So that's kind of the two models we do. And now we're starting to see the hybrid model within the ITV model, where we're teaching from Zoom room to Zoom room, but there's also students joining remotely from wherever. And I'm not sure if that's what we're supposed to be doing or if the university is good with that policy. So it's formulating before our eyes on, we all know and understand all these delivery methods, but I think universities, in general, are going through identity crisis right now. What do we want to be? How do we want to deliver this? Do we want to do everything and have all the options on the table, which is probably what students want, right?
Well, I think you said some clever words there when we were going through that, Justin. You said the
I'm
ITV
clever.
model.
That's the best thing you've said about me since I've met you, Mark.
I want to dig into that
Mark,
ITV model.
Note the time.
That is great.
Yeah. So,
thanks for calling me clever.
Yeah. So the ITV, because I think that conjures up like the old television classroom experiment. And I want,
because we're replacing those right now with Zoom rooms, and it's just a one-to-one replacement, and so they're being used differently, and it's like
But I'd like to get into, what did those ITV classrooms, television classrooms, distance education capable rooms provide the university as a service? What did it actually solve for? What did it do? We all probably had a variant of that at some point on our campus. To the layperson, they'd walk in and say, what are all these funky microphones and cameras and stuff laid out all over this room? And why is there a room attached to the back of this one with a window through it? And this guy who's peering through there, why is he there? What is he doing? So what did that do? Me? What were they doing? So,
well, more accurately, Mark, why is there an entire room back there with nobody in it and a whole bunch of gear that no one's using right now? That's the more common use.
Right.
That's more accurate.
So there was a lot of consortiums of schools that were sharing education through, and a lot of that was over video, and some of it was a network, some of it was over different fiber paths and the like. But is that what we're trying to replace? One-to-one, was that the goal of what you're doing for Zoom rooms, Justin? Is like to not do the ITV? And if so, like what is it that you're solving for? So
what spawned all of this for us was we were running a Polycom bridge with no backup that was end of life, that had no maintenance on it, that was handling hours and hours of class content per week. And we were all flipping out. We've got to do something. Let's get Zoom to be this bridge. And that's what we did. And along with that came the Zoom rooms. And we were all doing this obviously before COVID hit. And that's just kind of what our administration said was, if we need to get all of these $15,000 codecs out of these rooms, get rid of all this crap. It needs to be updated anyway. Let's replace it with something that costs 25% of the cost, right? And it fits our model because this is how teachers are used to teaching, and that's just what we're going to do. That's not right or wrong. Well, that's just what we're doing. So,
but what about it? What is it that those products enable in the classroom experience? What is it that they are providing for the instructor and or the student there or on the far end? Like what is that experience?
I don't know, and this is unfortunate. I want to dive deeper into how these systems are being used, because before I knew how they were used, but now we're introducing people coming from afar into the room, and we have 2 displays in the front. Do we even need that second display? Because now you just see a bunch of little people up there, right? So there's a lot of questions I have of these Zoom rooms. What components are actually being used properly for the right education and right communication between rooms or between people and people, and what aren't? So those are good questions.
Well, for me, I'd like to just pose it this way. There's probably a camera in there. There's probably a computer in there. So do we make the assumption that camera is capturing people? Are they capturing other elements of the room? What's the computer doing? Are we uploading and transmitting digital content? So what is it? What's two-way, one-way, outbound, inbound? So what is the sum total of the ITV television classroom experience? Because I think Zoom is a product, and yes, it does enable some of those things, but must we have a camera to do that? Must we have digital content sharing? Where's the threshold?
We have 2 cameras to do that.
So if we're trying to replace something that's a dinosaur and replace it, like what features do we look for, and what does that get us?
Well, and I guess I'd also like to open that up and say to other schools, what does distance education mean and maybe this is, Mark, this is to your point. If someone says, Larry, we need a distance ed room, or Jamie, we need some distance ed rooms because that's the thing. What's that mean? What goes in there? What's happening in there? And is it, and maybe jumping ahead here, but are we building them the same way we would have if that same question was asked 10 years ago?
How am I educated at a distance? How does one go about doing that?
Well, I'm educated from 8 or 10 feet away from the instructor, right? That way.
So what's an effective way to do that? And so, I think that's the question we're solving for, right? So if we have students who are not in the room, what is it they need access to have an equitable experience from afar?
Well, as far as for general equity, I would say that your equity of experience where they should be able to, this is my interpretation. So you guys can, disagree as you like, but I would say somebody in the room and somebody who's online in a same sort of hybrid scenario like that should have access to the same exact content and a very, very, very similar experience as much as possible. So from the standpoint of somebody in the room or online, it shouldn't matter where they are. They're able to participate to almost the same level in the course. So there is no disenfranchisement if I can't get to campus or I don't feel safe on campus or something like that.
It's synchronous delivery. So it happens in the same time.
I'm starting synchronously. I think that's where we need to start that conversation because it'll be recorded afterwards. But that's a.
Because I don't think I need to be educated from afar. I don't know if I necessarily have to be there at the same time you are.
Well, now, I guess that's
I would
the question.
agree.
Going back to my master's.
Is distance education the same thing as online education? And I would say no, those are different. I hear,
they can
to
be
me,
different.
distance means synchronous right now video call with people. Online is just like Justin said, look, there's a LMS and you do this and there's recordings and I save stuff and that's online education.
I agree
see
with
those
that.
as different.
And when we're talking about equity of experience, part of that is access. And people who are physically there have this access to their peers and to the instructor that we need to create an equity of experience for people who are distance education learners. Like that's I think where the parity gets really tricky. It needs to be just as easy for this distance education students to both access the instructor in order to ask a question, get clarification, to collaborate with their peers and benefit from their ideas and insights, but also to make an impression on their instructor and their peers to get that benefit of networking, which is part of what you're paying for when you're paying for a higher education experience.
And I just think making the two equitable is such a high bar that we can try to do that. But in my mind, the only way we can do that is to start lowering the bar on the in-person experience. That's why when you mentioned so many of the schools talking about maybe not doing hybrid or not going distance ed, that might be part of the challenge. It is a different instruction method.
And I think that's where exactly. And I think and that's where we've been hung up on this whole thing before, right? Is is what is the right way to reach students? What is an add-on? And for me, a lot of this HyFlex is an add-on. It's a convenience, right? If I signed up for the synchronous course, and I can't make it, so I'm joining from afar, from a distance, then that's a bonus. That's an add-on. That's a thank God it's here because I can't always make it, right? That's because I'm a single mother. That's because I'm a working dad, whatever, right? But I do think one of the struggles that and I know in this group, we've been fighting a lot at our own institutions and even at other institutions that we're loosely related to, is that just because you can do this now, does that make it the way to do it? Because we've all established that the instructor, it's a different mindset. You have now dumbed down everything in order to make the hit that equity thing, right? Because if you focus on the at homes, then or the in front of yous, the people, then you're not focusing on the virtual. And if you're focusing on the virtual, you're not focusing on and so it's just really so difficult. And I think that's where we keep running into these fights. And sometimes, decisions are made by, it's the classic thing that leadership's making decision without consultation. They're on their little survivor island and they've made the call, right? And they voted you out, but they don't really know what they voted for. They just know they voted for it. And I think that's what we're struggling with, where, in the past with these ITV courses, the satellite courses, the studio space, right? Part of that was that they would record them and they would send, by mail, they would send them to the rural areas that there weren't community colleges or whatever, so you could still take chemistry from somewhere else and you just got a VHS tape, right? Some high school somewhere got this college level course and the production value, supposedly the production value is raised and it now becomes more of an infotainment than strictly a class. Because let's face it, most classes, when you just watch them, are boring as all get out. Yeah, that instructor may be awesome, but when you're just sitting there watching it, you're bored out of your gourd. Now, you watch that same content, maybe even from the same instructor on their personal YouTube channel, and they're throwing Mentos and Coca-Cola and telling you how it works, and it's actually exploding everywhere. Now you're drawn in, right? Because you're like, whoa, because the production value is different. It's more information through entertainment than just watching somebody's lecture. And I think that's where we really start getting these things confused.
Larry, get in there.
Well, mentioning the ITV stuff, not every course was offered for that. And I think that's a key thing is that delivery method doesn't work for everything. And
work for,
right now,
cadaver lab, right? That's
does it
really
work
hard
for
to do.
a philosophy class where most of it's seminar based? I mean, there's just so many courses
that's probably illegal.
So many courses that doesn't work for. And so by us taking that model and just pushing it everywhere, we're really seeing a lot of students struggle, I think.
Well, here's the way, you look at it from the administration side. They're starting to see this as a resource problem because what they're realizing is that students want, when you talk about students in general, like all students, they want every option. This student over here wants to take biology 100 in person, and then this student over here wants to take biology online, just read material, take a test, and they're done. And this other student wants to take it a different way. And colleges don't have the resources to hire that many teachers and to schedule everything out in buckets to where you have 3 or 4 buckets for every class for a certain learning type or delivery method. So now we're trying to cram delivery methods together. And this is where we are because WKU can't hire 25 teachers for biology 101 or whatever that would take for that many students because we have all these electives, right? And every student at college has to have this one elective. So I think
there's opportunity, I think, in all that.
Yes.
So we just went through like the the craziest experiment ever. We just forced everything on, and we are really finding out what worked and what didn't, because the metrics are finally coming back. They're asking the questions to students. Did this work? What was your experience with this? So they're actually, at this point, is data around what should or shouldn't happen. And it's a matter of kind of learning that. Like, right, okay, obviously these classes don't make sense to be in there.
Yeah, and back to what Justin said about, the same class being offered in 3 different methodology or ways. All 3 ways are probably perfectly valid, and there are students who would learn well in all 3 ways. It's just maybe the university doesn't have to offer it in all 3 ways. Universities have their identities and their specialties. Western Governors University, for example. I've got a lot of friends who have went there or work there, and it's all asynchronous, and that's their identity, and that's fine. Like, that is their experience. That is what students expect when they sign up for that. And as long as you design your courses knowing that up front, it can be an effective method. I just don't think it's for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good point, Larry. There are a lot of schools who are exactly the inverse, right? Where their whole model is that all of their courses are project-based, seminar-based learning, or a direct tutoring model. And that's what they specialize in. And that's why you want to go there if you want to go there. And I think especially at the higher education level, allowing people to opt into an institution that represents their preferred learning style makes a lot of sense. You just have to have some fail safes in there in case, a global pandemic hits.
Yeah. You have to be flexible when the entire place shuts down for a year.
Yeah, so we tried, right? We had to do a lot of different things. But I think going back to even the original piece, Chris, the question around like continuing to do distance ed, and is to the administrators who answered that poll, did they look at their kind of portfolio and say, well, distance ed, we have 12 of those classrooms. Well, maybe we're not going to do those full 12 classrooms like that. We don't want to pay to staff those rooms and have people create these ITV experiences. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to do more of the self-paced, run it yourself, turn the camera on, share through Zoom or whatever your other collaboration platform is. And maybe they don't identify that as distance education. Maybe it's just, my class gets outbound by way of software, so the administrator doesn't know the nuance. And so they're just looking at their course offerings.
To your point, if we don't define distance education, that 33% could be, that's how many universities are going back to the ITV model.
Right. And so
you don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of room for interpretation in the way that survey was phrased, because it depends on who they asked and how it was asked and how they responded. And yeah, they're like, well, no, we're only going to do 33%, or I guess that's the wrong way to phrase it. 33% of the university said, yeah, we're going to have these ITV spaces, or we're going to have these dedicated programs which link up with other regional institutions or whatever. It's a different model. Whereas I think if nothing else, we can say that distance education in the larger kind of global sense certainly isn't going anywhere. It's only going to expand. And if we've seen anything from the last year, it's that there's different modalities and ways of delivering things asynchronously, synchronously, remotely, virtually, whether you do the flipped classroom model, or you're doing, you have to be here at 2:00 on Tuesdays to take the class. We've seen over the last year plus that has been something that I think has been accepted by most, as there will be some aspects of this throughout my collegiate career. It may not be every class. There may be some semester students take all their classes in kind of this weird hybrid high flex environment, and some semesters where they take none of their classes that way, because I think there certainly are those subjects and things that don't lend themselves to that. And at the same time, instructors who may have been forced into that over the last year, when they have the opportunity to go back to campus and teach in a more traditional sense, they say, thank goodness. But maybe we do need to have it so they're being mic'd appropriately, and you can hear the students in the room, and you can stream that class out, even if there's only 2 people watching it, and it's just because, Jamie, you talked about the convenience thing. I can't get to class today, but at least, hey, we've planned this out, we've prepped for it, we know how to deliver these, so at least we can make it available for the 3 students who can't be here today. It's not our primary method of instruction, but it's like that added benefit, which just makes it more accessible to everybody. regardless of what the subject is. So I don't know.
Do you think the survey results would be different if the question was worded, do you feel, like, quote unquote, do you feel the university is going to be better set up with Zoom or Teams being in place? Like something stupid, simple like that.
I don't think most people who answer this question could answer that question because they don't know what Zoom or Teams. To them,
you don't think they know what that is either?
I think Zoom has become the Kleenex term.
The Coke, right?
Rachel, you may know. There's a term for that where like an item gets identified as a brand and that speaks for the Kleenex or the Coke or whatever that might be. But I think
that
Zoom,
sounds like a word that both should exist and that I should know. But I agree with you.
I think it's Kleenex. I think that's the word.
Zoom is the Kleenex / Band-Aid.
And I'm just wondering how much that percentage would change if that was mentioned. Is it more 70% now? It's like, oh yeah, I recognize Zoom.
Are going to continue to use Zoom in their in their education
and their education delivery methods, and then see what that metric look like instead of distance education. Even though we all see that as very much similar under the same umbrella. Or
it's hard to say how that was defined in the survey. I'm digging for it.
I think there may also have been some wishful thinking there. I know that in my local school district, their mandate for K through 12 next year is going to be everybody in class 5 days a week, unless you're not feeling emotionally prepared to return to the building, in which case ... question mark. But people will not be required to return to a brick and mortar facility yet because they acknowledge that it's not that there are going to be a lot of people who just aren't ready yet.
Our school just sent out a very similar email, except ours was K through 12. You will be back in school next year, Monday through Friday, yada, yada, yada. With the caveat that if you don't want to go, we have aligned with a national online service that specializes in online teaching, so our teachers aren't forced to try to work with that. And so they're not trying to play the game of we're going to do everything for everybody. We're going to figure out what we're good at. We're good at teaching kids in person. And if you don't like that, there are other groups that specialize.
But they're still part of the school. So if they wanted to go to prom, they can still do all those things, right?
I exploded on our local district last year because they didn't do the same thing. I was just like, you guys are out of your goddamn mind. Because
it's such a sensible application of the consortium model, right? Where it's
already out there.
Yeah.
It's already out there. And use your local universities because we already have been doing this. It's strange. Now, we focused a lot on the teaching side of this, right? And distance education and stuff. But how about as the techno nerds? How are we dealing with it? Because I'm in the midst of doing one of these distance ed classrooms that's wants to be built around ITV model, but wants it to be independent learning, right? Independent teaching. Like, so the teacher does all the work, except that they have a control room with a technician and staff and stuff, except that they want to use it, but they don't. And I'm just in this real big gray area. And I also have the models like everybody else. And I got a new one today. And I like it and I don't. Music asked, conservatory asked, hey, we just want to take this little 12 by 12 room. Great. And we're going to outfit it with all the equipment so that music teachers can bring in whatever instrument of choice is and be able to record / broadcast their lessons from here. And I was like,
that's a sound booth.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but themselves. Yeah, it's a one-touch recording for
invented in 1982.
They've invented the sound.
82.
Good job, guys.
I just threw it.
So they want to use since 1940. They want to use this stuff, but they want it to be that one touch recording, that one touch send. And I just asked some very simple questions. I'm like, okay, great. Is the piano going to be here all the time? Well, no, we're going to push it in. Okay, well, do you want a camera that comes over the keys so you can see the keys? Well, obviously.
Well, that would be nice, yeah.
Like, okay, well, how about
We want that too.
On a guitar?
Sure.
Where do you want to do that? And then they start thinking of the logistics, because in their brain, and I'm getting this a lot now that we're starting to see more activity around the school and preparing for next year, is that now that folks are away from home, they just kind of assume that it'll be more TV-like. Like automatic cameras. We've all heard tons about these automatic camera tracking, and because I want it to follow me around, and I want it to zoom in close, and then when I go away, I want it to be big, and when I start writing on the whiteboard, I want it to automatically go to the whiteboard. And you're like, well, wait, you want a technician? No, you just want it to automatically do these things. Okay, well, I can give you a button.
Jamie, you're going to
I can give you a motion sensor. No, I just want it to smartly intelligent. And you're like, wait, would you done this at home? Well, no, I don't know how to do this at home. But now that I'm here, I expect for you to provide me the TV experience. I'm like, oh my gosh.
But
you running into that.
You got to focus on
like it's that,
what
it's
is that experience?
YouTube experience.
Define it from the instructor perspective, from the student perspective. What are they getting out of this? And how do you actually provide that for them? Don't wait for the vendor to come by and say, hey, you need this camera that does all this whiz-bang things. We have this really sharp cookie cutter. Can you find us a cookie to put in there? Like, don't wait for that. Like, you should really own that experience of what you're delivering for that distance or online or synchronous, whatever it wants to be called, so that you know how to deliver that with the correct tool set.
I think the music room example is really interesting, though, because what they're essentially asking for is a panopticon. They might not know it, but they're looking for a room where you can shoot any portion of the room from any angle. And that is a level of monitoring and like coverage, capture coverage that I think most people would have found pretty disturbing a year and a half ago.
It's yes, and that's why I said I love the idea, because I've wanted to do cool things like this, like in chemical hoods in chemistry. Right, because they do all this work under this hood and nobody can see it, right? And I'm like, well, let me add this, and they're like, no,
just let them go use the doc cam, Jamie. That's what they're going to do. Mark can tell you all about it.
Let me add this. I'll show you how this can work for you.
Melt the doc cam,
and they're very content on, well, everybody gather around. And now
don't worry about the fumes. That'll burn.
And now they understand that they want to gather their remote learners around too.
So, but I keep running into these, because again, okay, let's go back to my music room thing. And as technology installers and designers, how do we help bridge this gap of distance education? Because they asked me for all this, and I'm like, that's a wonderful idea. And they said, we're going to budget $10,000.
It'll never happen.
Sorry.
So, Jamie,
just for the design, right? That's just for the design.
Yeah. So,
and
Jamie,
I was like, well, I think we're going to have to think about this.
I went through something similar from a business school who sees this giant Harvard online model and that big fancy TV production going on there, and they look at that and they say, we want that. And then you say, what you don't see, and this is kind of to your point, what you don't see is the team of 8 people who are there every time that room's in use to make it look that good. So yes, you see the professor standing there doing their thing, or in your case, they're getting out their guitar and they're going through their demonstrations, but there's 6 people involved in that, not just them. So they see it as, I can walk in, I sit down and do my 45-minute thing and I leave, and then somebody, a team of people then spends the next week putting that together so it's ready to go. So they're not seeing that, and I think that's an opportunity for us as the AV experts, as the e-learning experts, to try to help them get to that realization that if they're seeing that TV style production, that there's a lot that goes into that behind the scenes that isn't going to be accomplished with $10,000 and B in any sort of scalable application. So
yeah, if you're making a space that has choices, who's making the choices? Is the instructor making the choices? Is the DSP or automation system making the choices, or is there another FTE making the choices? Define those.
Or are you just bringing everything into Zoom and the student is making the choices of what they want to view at any given time?
But that should be spelled out in your experience.
So I I hate to cut this short, but we're going to have to because we don't have another 6 months to try to hash out what distance ed means and how we're going to do that. But as you can see, there are a wide range of applications and subjects and methodologies and delivery methods and all those categories to what distance education means. Rachel, by the way, the best I could come up with was genericize or genericide, because if you refer to the point of a generic term killing off a brand name, apparently Velcro in particular hates that. But I think that Zoom has become that generic term, and people say we want a Zoom space or a Zoom room. I also, by the way, I run into that a lot. I want a Zoom room. I was like, well, wait, that means something different to me than it does to you. So let's talk through that and figure out if that's what really
in a room capable of Zoom.
What is the difference of a room with Zoom versus a Zoom room? But there is no single answer to what distance education means, and I think that's probably why we saw that survey have such a weird response to it. 33% are going to do distance education. Well, wait, what? What does that mean? And all sorts of questions come from there. So we are certainly going to come back to this topic. This is not going to get answered today. It'll be interesting to have just our 6 perspectives, and then, all the rest out there. I think everyone's going to have a different approach to it at every institution, at every topic, every subject, every college at our schools. It's going to be a real humdinger. So if you have an answer, let us know what product is. We can buy that because we're looking for that cookie cutter. But in the meantime, let's take a quick break.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
All right, well, for this segment, we're going to delve into the mailbag here, and I have a letter that I received from an actual live person. But instead of reading said letter, we're going to have actual live person join us right now. So
that's the kind of budget
Aaron
we
Peterson.
have here. We
shipped him in. We flew him in just for this segment.
And boy, are his arms tired.
Yeah, you got it. And this segment is 8 minutes long, so it was very expensive if you count it by the minute. But Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hello.
You sent an email to the mailbag following up on our discussion from a few shows ago about is Higher Ed AV Pro AV, and you raised some good points about kind of that interaction, that relationship between universities and colleges and AV integrators. And I thought, well, rather than going back and forth via email, let's just have you on to kind of hash that out, because you raised some very good points, and I want to make sure that you get to say your piece. But So you had mentioned that when universities and colleges, when they work with integrators, sometimes they get good products or good final products, sometimes they don't, and there's reasons for that, and then a lot of it has to do with cost and service value and total cost of ownership and things like that. But what's been your experience working with universities and colleges? Do you consider them professionals, or are they just kind of going through the motions and you guys have to come in as the experts to do the job right? Otherwise, goodness only knows what they're going to end up with.
I definitely would say that Higher Ed AV is definitely professional AV. For anybody that's done any work on with any higher ed institutions, the people that specifically work at the higher ed institutions for AV are definitely professionals. Now, you did bring up some points on the podcast that yes, there are sometimes shortcuts that get made here and there, or sometimes pieces of equipment aren't always applied in the most professional manner. And sometimes that has some stigmas attached to it. But I think overall, absolutely, higher ed AV is definitely professional AV. And I believe that should be considered as such. One of the things you guys talked about is I think you guys called it the briefcase syndrome of people that come onto your campus with a briefcase that they're always the de facto experts. And I don't really agree with that. I think that you should work together to come up with a common system or solve the problem that you both should be solving. It shouldn't be a you versus them kind of atmosphere. It should be, let's see how we can take your campus standards and work together to make sure that we come up with a solution that's best for the professors, for the students to actually accomplish what the room or system's supposed to do.
And I think that is the dream, and I think that's what we are trying to get towards. But I think there are some integration firms out there that may not see things in that same light. But I totally agree with you. I think that's the end game is we should be working together. We should be a part of the same team and not two opposing forces.
One thing I didn't say so those who don't know who I am, my name is Aaron Peterson. I am a solutions engineer for Mechdyne. We are an integration firm based here in Iowa, but we've done work all over the world for both higher ed institutions and for commercial clients all over the world, and just based out of here in Iowa. But personally, some of my favorite clients are higher ed institutions, whether it's doing some of our high-end visualization VR systems or just doing general classrooms. We've kind of accomplished it all, and I just wanted to come on and we can talk about that relationship with you guys.
Aaron, one of the things you had mentioned was that oftentimes you'll go to university to work with them, and you'll find there's a lot of consumer gear has kind of snuck in because, hey, a TV is a TV. Why am I paying more for this when I can get a TV for $600? Is that something you find more often than not, or is that still the outlier? Because I know I can only speak from my experience. I work very hard to ensure that consumer electronics does not end up in a commercial AV integration, but it does happen. Usually it's a department who has said, we already have this. Can we use it? And for the most part, the answer is generally no, because there's no control port and it doesn't have any sort of monitoring capability or network connections and things like that. But, what are you finding out there when you visit universities?
I definitely see more of a commercial stuff in a lot of universities. Yes, some of the consumer stuff does come in, and hey, our student organization had a little bit of money. We went to Best Buy and used our P card to purchase a 55-inch TV for our office that we're hanging ourselves. It's not connected to any control system. You don't need to monitor it. You don't need to control it. It's just literally for us to hang out during our office hours just to plug with. Now, for the actual classrooms or lab environments, that kind of thing, those absolutely, for the most part, are commercial grade displays. I'm sure everyone's well aware that like Samsung, LG, all of the manufacturers have like a 24/7 line, and then maybe like a 16/7 line of professional displays, or maybe a different brightness levels, that kind of thing. And a lot of universities maybe are going for the 16/7 because they're only being used in huddle spaces, just for teams, just for small group study or lab sessions, that kind of thing. But then the 24/7 are used in the hallways or digital signage, that kind of stuff.
So when you get called in to consult on a project for a higher ed university, we're going to go back a little bit
Sure.
to our discussion before, is when you get called in and you say, hey, you're going to do work for Pork Rinds University, right? And so you say, great. Do you this is where sometimes the disconnect is. Do you typically ask for, like, one, normally you ask for scope of work and some other things, but do you ask, hey, is there a local AV people? Do we need to start talking with them? I mean, let's say you've never worked with Pork Rinds University. Do you even know we exist? Do you even ask for us? How do you normally deal with that?
So a lot of times, the way Mechdyne works is our account managers will go out and find, let's say it's a department at someone's university, and they're like, hey, we have this room we want to outfit. And so they'll bring me in to kind of start doing the solutions for it. One of the questions I am going to ask is, I would like, if they do have a team, such as most of you guys are for technology managers, do they have an AV team on staff that can also be present during this meeting? Even though they might not be a room owner, I like having that person, at least a representative present, be like, what are your guys' campus standards? Are you guys an Extron house? Are you a Crestron house? Do you use AMX? Like, are you guys using AV over IP? What's your network situation like? Because even though the room might not be owned by you guys, I'm guessing you have some sort of management protocol in place that you guys probably have it in Fusion or Global Viewer Enterprise or whatever management software you guys are using, so that you're aware if that room goes down. Or obviously you guys have enterprise grade networks, so everything's all intertwined. I don't want to have a standalone network switch be an island out there not connected to the network to be different than anything else you have on campus. That's, no one's going to be happy if that happens.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I just know that's one of the things that we get is that, you know, that we don't know if that question, we don't always know if that question was asked. Like, are there people there? And then secondly, you know, if you came to where I'm currently employed and you said, hey, we're providing this solution, you know, typically my first response back is, well, that's my job. How often do you get that? Or is it just, you've been contacted by somebody? I'm just curious. What's it like being on the other end? Because I personally haven't had to be there. Larry has, you know, Justin does every now and then, but I'm just wondering.
Well, it depends on the project. So Mechdyne does a lot of specialty type systems, and that's part of where a lot of campus standards start to kind of fall apart. And the reason why I say that is, if I'm doing a 3D system, there's a lot of projectors on the market that just can't do 3D. Like if you guys use like some of the Epsons out there, some Panasonics, or a lot of them they just don't do 3D. Now, so the system that I put in will probably have a different projector than one you're used to. However, I might ask your team for, hey, can I get a sample of your GUI layout that you guys have for your touch panels? Because we're going to probably do our own custom programming on top of it. But if I can at least start with yours, so it's at least familiar for most clients going in, then that's what it is. Typically, I would hope that if a professor, for example, would start internally to their own university before they start looking externally to bring someone in for something. I know that that's not always the case, especially like so we do a lot of work here, for example, with Iowa State, and I went to one where it was just such a low kind of hanging fruit, and it's just we would have had more labor costs than we would have even hardware. And they didn't even realize that Mike Peterson and his team, that they can do that kind of work, that basic work for them. And I actually let them know that, have you talked to Mike Peterson and have you roped into them into this conversation? Oh, no, they didn't even realize that was an option. And so I'm glad to help sometimes bridge that gap. Sometimes it's more cost effective to bring someone from the outside in for one reason or another. Sometimes it's better to work internally, especially if it's something simple. And I feel that we're all on the same page, just trying to come up with the best solution for the end user.
One thing I found since I've been in higher ed, I spent 13 years with a commercial integrator, most of those as a design engineer, is while I was a commercial integrator doing the needs analysis with the client, I would get the people who were going to teach in the room, or I'd get facilities in the room. I would rarely get an instructional designer or somebody who really understood teaching and learning in the space. And that's something I've been pushing for the longer I've been in higher ed, is to make sure I develop those relationships. When you're doing those needs analysis, are you, I'm just trying to get an idea of what other universities are doing. Are you often interacting with instructional designers, or is it typically just the facilities or the departments that are getting the space?
It's typically just the departments. Maybe they'll bring in professors that are actively using the room. If it is a specialty space, especially with professors, like we've done a number of like vet med rooms that have a lot of cameras and things so that they can do high-end recordings. And like, I want to talk through the use cases of, we're going to put a camera here, here, and here, and even one on we're going to build a custom track that you can pull the camera forward and back. And we need to talk through that. And now, like I said, I want to have someone from the AV representative team there just to make sure that, oh, well, that's you're stepping on our standard, or we use these types of cameras. Okay, that's fine. We can start doing that. And I think communication is key. Bringing us in is really the best case scenario for us. Part of where I think a lot of universities end up having problems is when something goes out to bid, like through an RFP, and those conversations with the end users can't happen, or like they're not supposed to happen because of the RFP process. And I think that's where a lot of universities end up with issues with integrators, is through that RFP process, whether it's a low bid situation where the absolute lowest person is automatically awarded the job. That's often where we see a lot of issues that, oh yeah, we had this AV company come in and they just were subpar for one reason or another, but they were the lowest bid, so we had to use them, and we've had to come in and maybe fix control code or fix this and this, or now they want to do an upgrade that's so small that can be sole sourced, and while they're doing a small upgrade, hey, can you fix this? That's never worked, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's certainly a chunk of that out there. So, Aaron, in your experience, kind of going back to that relationship side of it, are there things that universities you work with do well on that communication side, or things that make that process easier? Because I think how projects come to be are really important, and sometimes they may be a capital project, sometimes it's a one-off project. But if you're kind of showing up, if everything was clear and made easy for you, what are like the top things that you would look for to say, okay, let's make this easy? Like what kind of document sharing, or what information, or who should be at the table, and like kind of what would make it easier for both parties from your perspective?
Yeah. Basically, obviously, we talked about the room users. They're obviously very important. If there is a procurement person that probably needs to get involved, maybe get them involved. I know certain universities and other institutions have price points that if a deal hits a certain price point, it has to go out to bid. In certain situations, that's okay. We've seen a number of very expensive systems go in that are not performing to the best that they really should be, because it had to go out to bid, and the end bidder kind of lowballed some things and cut some corners and didn't do things what I would call the right way, because technically it fit the RFP and it fit all the check boxes, but it's a very clunky system and takes 20 seconds to switch a input on things just because they have a very convoluted system. And we have seen that. If there's going to be a lot of facilities work, like if we're talking about a big LED video wall or an LCD video wall that might need a lot of power, sometimes bringing in a facilities person right away might be very helpful. Especially if it's a historic building that they can't put wire in the walls. You have to run everything in Panduit, or we can't cut a trough to the table to get a nice seam. So you have to have, again, like a cable bump for that. And so sometimes facilities people are really nice to have involved. Are you doing an AV over IP system? And do we need to get networking at least involved in the conversations early? That's very important. That was one thing that, especially, like, I know Extron even requires a network diagram to even sell their equipment, the nav equipment, to you. And so having them involved as early as possible is very helpful. One thing that we were working with Iowa State for their Student Innovation Center, and we had someone from FP&M, but we really didn't have any architects involved in many of the conversations. And so we thought we had someone from facilities present in a lot of these meetings, but because nothing was 100% completely finalized, a lot of the conversations didn't get to the architect and didn't really necessarily get on the plans right away. And so when it came to some of the facilities work, and they were completely blindsided in some things, because from Mechdyne, we thought that a lot of internal communication was happening that just wasn't. And so just trying to keep as many parties involved as possible is is really important.
Well, Aaron, it sounds like you have a very detailed approach to AV integration, and I'm sure your clients appreciate that. Just hearing you talk about some of the aspects of things that you want to look into as you work with universities. And some of the things you're saying are kind of surprising to me, because I would think those universities would have people there, and you're finding out, no, there's nobody there, and we're having to do some of the legwork for them. And I think that's a great service you provide. I guess to the rest of the AV Super Friends, any last questions here for Aaron before we let him go from the on that relationship between integrators and universities? No? All right. Well, Aaron,
one thing I did kind of want to talk a little bit about so we talked about our aspect, and a lot of the things that you guys do very well, being like technology designers that you do, is a lot of times you guys are handling that needs analysis a lot more on the internal side, and then you bring the integrator in, and that's having that step done from your side is often very helpful for us, because you can be that filter between, well, they're requesting this, but what they really mean is this. And that's very helpful for us, that you guys can help be that technical filter, and you guys know what's best for your institutions of what are your capabilities in-house versus when you need to bring in an outside integrator. So that's very important.
I would
for us
definitely,
too.
I would definitely think that anybody at the university themselves from the technology team would want to be involved in that conversation, because they know their school, they know their instructors, and they know their students best. And it I hate to phrase it this way, but it kind of runs interference for you to let you do your job and not have to try to wrangle and interpret and try to identify and walk people through, the myriad of solutions that might be the best fit for them. But at the same time, there's going to be something, as you mentioned earlier, that campus is familiar with or campus can support. And so that would be certainly a place to start. So having that conversation done on your behalf by somebody internally is probably going to take some shortcuts in some of those things and get you a better answer faster. So. Well, Aaron, thanks again for joining us. Do you want to plug your organization or plug yourself on LinkedIn or any of that fun stuff?
Sure. Well, you can find me on Twitter at _AVAP. Again, at www.mechdyne.com. And thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Aaron. It's a pleasure.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So, here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
Well, welcome back. So our additional topic today is going to be one that I think we've all dealt with, and it's our topic du jour because of some comments from Mark recently on a project he's been working on. It's something that I've dealt with, something that Jamie's dealt with, something that Larry and Justin and Rachel, we've all dealt with this topic, and this is the topic of movable, portable or transportable, but movable, flexible, technology-enabled furniture in a AV-enabled space. The idea that, we want to move this around because today we want to orient the room this way, or sometimes I want to move this out of the way, but I still want all the functionality of the room to be available somehow, or we don't want any permanently installed furniture in the space, but we need you to install all your stuff somewhere. We're not going to give you a closet or a credenza or a rack anywhere. So maybe, in fact, Mark, why don't you give us a little bit of background on the one you were dealing with, and I think came from a consultant and their proposed solution.
And we all have had these rooms. This one particular space in question here is a performance venue / learning space, right? So and the dream is that I have these multiple locations where I can take this lectern and drop it around on a stage if need be, or maybe I don't want to have it today. So the system still has to function with or without this technology. And so it's gone back and forth. Instructors are opinionated about it. And I always come back to the question of when somebody talks about it and says, we'll just do this. I make sure, can you please define wheel? Because I don't know a single instructor who is willing to move a piece of furniture whatsoever on campus, let alone be responsible to plug it into any type of port on a wall. I would give them the benefit that they know what a power cable is. Anything above that, I don't think any of them have the desire to move that. So we're kind of balancing this in this project because they want to have some specific use of a lectern. It needs to have confidence monitors and things like that because they don't want to have to turn around to see a large screen. So as it unravels, we find the requirements grow on this. And I'm trying to do damage control to make sure that we're not providing technology out there that overly complicates the experience for the instructor, because right now I don't wish it upon them to have to decide where all of these cables go. And so is there a sweet spot? Is there a compromise of technologies we are okay with on portable furniture and things that we just say, no, we really should not be doing that on portable lecterns and furniture?
So we did this once, and it was not successful. And it was not a classroom. It was more of a event space in our student center, where it was on this side of the room, we had a 3 combined, uncombined space. And on the other side, it was a 5 combined, uncombined space. And there was 1 lectern per side. And there was huge wall plates. And the way we did it was the lectern had a touch panel, computer, like everything you would see in a classroom. And there would also be a touch panel on the wall right above that wall plate. And so whenever the the staff members, not instructors, but staff members of the student union moved the lectern around, every pin or every connector was different and it was labeled different. So even if we had a microphone 1 and mic 2, that second mic was a 4-pin XLR, not a 3. So this is going to work. We had a location pin that had to be plugged in that identified what plate it was connected to. That went back to the DSP. Added a shit ton of expense, added a shit ton of labor. It worked. Okay, it worked.
The one time it was
you
moved?
had to hold your head up and rub
Twice
your
a
belly
year.
and pinch your ear and point north. and
Make sure
lick your
all
finger.
the AV staff are available to make sure the
make sure
programmer can see
everybody-
that everything's connected and everything is there. And then, okay, we're clear.
Oh, and then make sure that person doesn't force a 5-pin into a 3-pin and bend all the pins, and make sure
I
that
can just
this
pull
doesn't
this
burn
out.
out.
Or the
So-
news crew came in and thought that was their camera power and just jacked the whole thing up.
So as
That's
you
my
can
intercom.
tell, this is, and these are students, not teachers. So they're, they damage things more, but they're a little bit more tech savvy. And so we definitely don't do this in classrooms. We do provide disconnect plates on all of our lecterns, because if we don't, the cleaning people that wax floors and vacuums will literally try and won't stop ripping the lectern off the wall, and the wires are frayed. And we've even gone to the point of making sure that the wall plate that has the connector that has the tension on it is the speak on. And I've been pulling on it like tug of war, and those sons of bitches will stay on there. So we've actually solved our problem, because now we've kind of taught the facilities like, okay, you disconnect all this crap, and if this doesn't fit, try another hole, because it's not made for that hole, right? So that's our experience with movable lecterns.
I've actually installed
Advice for every
airline
teenager.
cable as my shortest cable, just so when the cleaning people move it, that takes the tension. As far as movable things, I've done it what I consider to be successfully once. And that was because in the past couple of years, AV over IP has made this a little easier. I had a lecture hall that was also a performance venue, and I used a swirling company's AV over IP system to make 3 connections on the stage. And it worked. I kept the PC, I kept everything up in the sound booth, because this is a performance venue and it had a sound booth, and I could do all that. But even though it was a successful space, it's a space where anytime they had performances in it, you had a sound crew there that would disconnect and reconnect. And we still got more classroom emergencies in that space than any other space that we had redone. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I've had same thing. I've had exactly one that was successful. One. I've had a whole bunch of them out there in various, just like you guys, in various arrays of disrepair, and now they're permanent. And mine also is a stage. It's a performance room where they can do their presentation. Senior recitals is where they do it. So they have a presentation and then they play their music or do their thing. And the thing that saves me is they have stagehands. They have technical people. Now, they're not trained by us, but they are very used and accustomed to quick moving, quick plugging, and moving along and making it work. And that's the only successful one I have. So every other one has been at some point permanently installed because it's just been such a nightmare.
That's what I was going to ask. How many are designed to do it, but always just land in one location? And you have all these optional plates that never get used.
Well,
in the old school way of doing it, the cost on those additional plates is huge.
Yeah. We do have success now, going back to that student union. You know what's on that lectern? A gooseneck
phone
microphone.
number?
A gooseneck microphone. One XLR, and it's 3-pin. And guess what all the XLR inputs are now on the wall plates? 3-pin. So if you are plugged here, you look up to the touch panel and you hit mic 3 up, and that increases your volume. And so if you make it stupid simple, one device, you can probably get away with it, right?
Yeah, in these performance venue spaces, it makes me think back to our conversation about distance learning. Like, what is the problem we're trying to solve here with a movable lectern? If the problem that we're trying to solve is that we want the option of an empty stage, or we want whoever is delivering the presentation to not feel chained to a specific space, there are other ways to solve that problem than a movable lectern. Other simpler, more elegant, more attractive ways to solve that problem than having, a cart with a big fat gaff tape wrapped tail hanging out of it.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
And architects love that look too. Just big giant cable trunks laying around everywhere.
It's exactly what they were envisioning when they designed the space.
Years ago, when Jamie and I worked at the same school, we did the entire business school building with almost every classroom had 3 locations for the lectern. And Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding on this, the reason for that was because they couldn't get all the instructors to agree on which side of the room they wanted to stand on. Some left, some right, some center. And so this became an opportunity to say, oh, well, we'll go active learning, and we can flexible move the space around, and all the stuff can move, and it'll be different. And then we started raising the question of, well, who's going to do that? Because it ain't going to be those instructors doing it.
Chris, as you're describing this, I'm looking at Jamie's face right now, and I think he's going to have a meltdown.
But we dealt with those early days of, Justin, like you described, people would move them anyway. And they were like, well, these cables seem to be stuck on something. If I apply more force, it will come loose, and look, it moves. Hey, this thing stopped working. Can you guys come take a look at it? It was like, well, it's not because you ripped a bunch of cables out. I will say, though, that we did learn very early on. We had there was a floor box where one of the receptacles was not working, and so an electrician came over to look at it, and he dutifully disconnected the lectern and moved it aside and repaired his receptacle in the floor box. And hey, kudos to the guy for doing it. He then plugged everything right back in. They, not to the right port or anything, but he just, there you go, click, 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 plugged them all right back in.
Cat 5, it's all the same, right?
And that's internet. What happened. We found out if you plug HD-Base-T into the campus network, everything stops.
It absolutely loves that.
Yeah, so it brought everything to a standstill. We also learned very quickly that a loop of aircraft cable solves a lot of problems.
I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, we went around and had a aircraft cable around the leg of the cart, and then it was 6 inches shorter than the shortest cable, and then screwed down to an eye bolt in each of the floor boxes. So when someone would move it, it would catch on that first. But even with that in there, we found after that first maybe 6 months or so, people stopped even requesting to move those around, and it became also because we would drag our feet in doing it to kind of encourage them to not do it. But it became one of those things where they would.
You have not been here for about 7 years now.
Yeah, about that.
And you haven't been here, and they haven't moved since you left. So Maybe
That's what I
it's
was
your
going to
fault.
say is that
Well, yeah.
aside from that, like 3 times a year when someone wants to do an event, those things don't move. They kind of, once they get in place, they live there. And that's been kind of my experience at multiple institutions is as flexible as you make a space, it will eventually settle after about 2 weeks. And then it's going to stay
Yep.
there 90% of the time for the rest of its life.
Yep. And whatever problems it was intending to solve, it is still solving them from a fixed position.
From a fixed
It's
position.
like its ability to move was not improving its ability to solve the problem. If you want to be able to hide the thing, there are solutions that will allow you to hide the thing without moving it. If you want to be able to move about the classroom freely, well, there are plenty of solutions that will allow you to do that. But you still just need a place to put all the stuff. And that doesn't need to
somewhere.
come with you.
No, it can stay somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is, as I said early on, this is something we've all dealt with in various ways. I think there's a little bit of difference in like a performance space. You have some more flexibility, Rachel, to what you're just saying, is to have things be hidden but still available. In a performance space, you generally have some more latitude there. In a teaching space, it's more of kind of convincing them they don't need 4 disconnect locations for their lectern. There are other ways to provide some flexibility to their lectern or to the general space without getting as complex as needing a giant matrix switch to handle all the potential endpoints. Or Larry, to your point, doing it over IP gives you that flexibility, but now you have to plan for that accordingly. So I think in general, we can all agree that movable furniture, this topic just really doesn't have any legs. So we're going to cut it off here. Oh, look at the groaning responses. All right.
That was bad.
So yes, if you are faced with the opportunity to do a movable lectern to create a truly flexible space, don't do it. If you're thinking about let's do disconnectable student furniture so they can have active learning stuff arranged in different ways, don't do it. Yes, there are technologies that can make that happen. There are technologies that can partially automate that. Someone still has to move that stuff around. It still adds time to the setup or breakdown after class or before class, and it's just not going to happen to any level of what someone thinks it might, especially if it's coming from a consultant. It's just not there. So when that comes up, and as I'm sure it will, shoot it down early or find an alternate, or to Mark's point, figure out what they're really trying to do. Let's go to that level, and that will help you determine what the appropriate solution is. So
Total cost of ownership will go up.
Just because you could do something doesn't mean you should do it.
but it moves. Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.